Hello, this is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is August 6, 2024. Welcome to the podcast. In continuing about elections, it's U.S. government policy on elections, which has been very interesting because I've seen that a lot more people are into and listening to that. So I'll keep that going up until the election. What I want to focus on today is how the political parties have changed the presidential election strategy just in the last week. Let me start with the Republicans. So the Republicans have picked a VP choice. They actually have gone through the right processes, like I've told you in previous podcasts of President Trump ran in the primaries. He got the delegates, and then the next phase was right before their convention. He picked someone. So his strategy, in my opinion, is he wanted someone who could win a state, and also he wanted youth. That's why I think that he picked Vance. And I think for him, Vance was a pick that he trusted. And trust is very important for these candidates. Now keep in mind, Trump can only serve, if he wins, this next term. So J.D. Vance might be the future of the Republican Party. Now let's look at the Democratic side. The Democratic Party, I think, is very powerful, and as I've told you in previous podcasts, it really looks like that they had a strong strategy since the election season started in January. As I've stated, Vice President Harris didn't have to go through a primary, and that gave her a huge advantage. Now, the Democratic Party is allowing her to take President Biden's delegates. So it's their rules. There's nothing constitutionally that they can't do it. The surprising thing is that the Democrats were on board with it. Now they've picked a VP. Now you can read and follow streaming about who the Democrats picked as their VP candidate nominee. I want a little bit of time to go by because one of the strongest reasons for me doing the podcast is I really want to know why Harris picked him and why the Democratic Party wanted him. So for now, I think that the Tim Walz is his name. So he'll be on Vice President Harris's ticket, and he's running for VP. So I did a little checking, but I want to, because I know that everybody's checking out who this guy is. He isn't well known. Governor Walz isn't. He's from Minnesota, which is a great state. But I think that the Democratic Party picked him because I don't think that in the future he wants to wait to be president. So he'd have to wait 8 years. So I checked his age. He was born in 1964, so he would be 69 when he would be eligible to actually run for president. And the Democratic Party, I believe, has been very, very strategic because there were at least 4 or 5 other governors in different states where these governors may have been more ambitious. Governor of Pennsylvania would have been a good choice. I think that he would have been more ambitious than who she picked. So that's what I think, and I'll follow up with this if the news media has let something slip. The next thing is, has anyone heard of the policies from the Democrats? The Republicans have actually pivoted from emotional politics, and you know that I've talked about that, to looking at policies. The Republicans have started doing that. So they're telling you what President Trump is going to do if he gets reelected. The Democrats, on the other hand, they're still not doing that. They've really pivoted to emotional politics. And like I said, if you want to hear that side of it, the news agencies are more than happy to get extreme with those. The Republicans actually want to keep those tax cuts that President Trump enacted back in, I think it was 2017 or 18. The next item that I want to talk about, policies that aren't being talked about. And also, before I get into that, did you notice, and I want to give President Biden credit for one thing. He is a party guy, meaning when the party tells him to do stuff, he will do it. When Hillary Clinton ran for president, Biden, in my view, should have been next up after Obama. And President Biden, let that go. Now, it worked out for him because after Clinton was defeated, he was next up, even though he was a little older. So the policies that are not being talked about, the first one is, and President Biden just started talking about it, he's talking about changing the composition of the Supreme Court. That is very huge. As I've always told you guys, judges are the most powerful institution in this country, because once you're on that Supreme Court, that's for life. Should they change the composition? I think that they should change it in the Constitution if they're going to do it, because then I can tell you that that is the will of the people of the United States. The other one is, that most people don't realize, is statehood for the District of Columbia. And you can check me out on these first two. They get exposure for a couple of hours and then they disappear. I mean, you can't even find that it's a talking point without really, really looking for it. The other thing I mentioned to you before that I'm going to remind you of, because this is a great example of what some of these departments like Secretary of State, Interior, people like that do. Every year they get billions of dollars in their budget. So the one that caught my attention was the president of Kenya was in the United States for a state dinner. It's been about 2 or 3 months ago. And they didn't mention why he was here. Well, just recently, the Secretary of State has released $109 billion to the Kenyans so that they can send their police to Haiti to get that country under control. See, that didn't have to go through Congress at all. And this is a prime example of what I'm talking about with the funding that these departments are getting, that they can fund other functions that Congress has not voted on. And that's important. And they can keep it quiet. They'll have it in the news agencies for 24 hours, and then it's buried. It is buried. And that's taxpayer dollars coming from the people of the United States. I think, and I've really pinpointed, that the media doesn't really seem to be agitated or worried about there not being a primary on the Democratic side. And although there are no rules in the Constitution that they can't do it like that, it's alarming to me that no one has really spoken out against it. And it's starting to really show how much the Democrats are in line with not wanting President Trump to get reelected. We have to look at the facts. And like I stated previously, it was a little interesting to me that the Democrats let President Biden debate. And some of my running buddies were talking about that, and how if they knew that he was that bad off, why not just delay? They didn't do that. So I'm saying all this to say that on the Democratic Party side, someone is really calling the shots. They seem to be very organized, and that scares me a little bit. Because with this last VP pick that they just have done, all of his faults they know about. Because just scanning the news agencies this morning, you know how they do. They'll start pinpointing anything bad that this guy has ever done. The Democrats know that, but this year, their strategy seems to be working for them pretty well. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Let me know what you think.